cluster of ships rides the horizon of the Philippines. Helicopters strove the sky, Marines, sailors, and soldiers from 7 nations move through coordinated drills on land, at sea, and in the air. But that has changed, and so has the choreography of alliance. What began as bilateral reassurance between Manila and Washington has widened into the most expansive Balikatan exercise in the history of the US-Philippines partnership. A commentator said, "That is not a training exercise, that is a statement." The phrase lands because it captures how these maneuvers are being read across capitals. Officially, Balikatan, Tagalog for shoulder to shoulder, is an annual exercise focused on interoperability, humanitarian response, and combined readiness. This year, however, the scale and the company involved make that description incomplete. More than 17,000 personnel from the Philippines, the United States, Japan, Australia, Canada, France, and New Zealand have been deployed across a program that spans land, sea, air, space, and cyber. Japan, notably, is taking on a combat role in the exercises for the first time in decades on Philippine soil. Observers from nearly 24 more countries are watching. Those numbers and participants are not trivia. They are a deliberate signal to partners, to adversaries, and to the publics of nations uneasy with rising tensions in the Indo Pacific. The timing of the drills, launched in late April 2026 and running into early May, could not be plainer. Manila and Washington are rehearsing the full spectrum of scenarios at a moment when maritime pressure in the South China Sea is intensifying and the wider security environment is turbulent. Beijing answered in a tone that has become familiar. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Jiak warned against what he cast as dangerous alliance building. Guo Jiak said, "We wish to remind the countries concerned that blindly binding themselves together in the name of security will only be akin to playing with fire, ultimately backfiring upon themselves. That is the diplomatic framing Beijing deployed. Exercises that bring external powers close to disputed waters provoke risk. They invite confrontation rather than stability." Beijing also moved ships and aircraft into the same operating areas. Chinese carrier elements and a Type 055 class guided missile destroyer, among the most capable surface combatants in the region, operated in parallel with and in the vicinity of the Balikatan activities. Some Chinese social media channels and pro-PLA outlets even asserted the launch of long-range anti-ship weapons during those operations. Independent verification of particular launches remains sparse, but the presence of significant planned formations east of Luzon. Manila's response has been blunt and public. Secretary of National Defense Gilberto Teodoro Jr., who has served in that role since mid-2023, rejected Beijing's warning and the implication that the Philippines should accept limits on sovereign partnerships. Gilbert Teodoro said, "Sino ba ang pinakamalaking magpakama dito sa buong mundo kung hindi sila? Hindi ba sa kanila inimbento yung fireworks tapos sasabihin, playing with fire tayo, ano sila hilo?" Put plainly, the Philippine defense chief ridiculed the suggestion that Manila and its partners were reckless. He targeted the rhetorical inconsistency, the idea that a country that has invested heavily in power projection can lecture others on avoiding risk. He also challenged specific Chinese allegations about contested shoals and discarded waste, demanding evidence and inviting accounting through international processes. For the Philippine government, Balikatan is a statement of agency, a demonstration that Manila can broaden its security options and do so with partners that bring real capability to bear. That capability matters. The drills feature live fire events, ship sinking exercises, amphibious landings, air defense, e-training and cyber and space resilience training, activities calibrated to test the alliance across domains. US officials say roughly 10,000 American personnel are participating alongside thousands of Filipino troops and contingents from partner militaries. For the United States, Balikatan is a visible rehearsal of combined operations in the Western Pacific, run in tandem with ongoing defense cooperation agreements that expanded access, logistics and rotational basing across the archipelago over the past several years. Observers reading the picture note 2 things at once. 1, the Philippines remains vulnerable as a single maritime state facing the growing capabilities of the People's Liberation Army Navy. Modern Chinese destroyers with long-range missile cells and advanced sensors change the operational balance in ways that are both technical and political. The Philippines is increasingly choosing alliance integration over asymmetric, independent balancing, Manila asymmetric, rises the limits of its fleet and is building deterrence through partnerships, legal positions and interoperability. That choice is playing out against a wider geopolitical backdrop that complicates the calculus. Across the globe, a separate and violent theatre. The war between the United States and its partners on one side and Iran on the other has demanded massive US military resources in the Middle East. Armadas, carrier groups and expeditionary forces have been concentrated in and around the Persian Gulf. Shipping lanes have been disrupted. Air and missile strikes. Shipping lanes have been disrupted. Air and missile strikes, along with defensive operations, have multiplied. Some analysts wondered whether a major US focus on the Middle East would allow strategic competition in the Indo Pacific to heat up. Balikatan's size is an answer to that concern. For Manila, the exercise is evidence that Washington's attention and commitment remain engaged in Asia despite the strains of the global security calendar. The fact that allied and par officers have streamed into the Philippines, that Japan has accepted a direct combat role on Philippine soil for the first time since the Second World War, and that European and Commonwealth militaries have joined as active participants. All of this recalibrates the message Beijing receives. It says Washington has not looked away. That message, however, is double-edged. Demonstrations of alliance will deter some forms of coercion, but they also raise the risk calculus. China's signaling, naval deployments, the public rebukes, and a willingness to mirror or shadow allied maneuvers with its own forces is intended to show both capacity and the political will to contest forward presence. The result is a tense choreography where both sides try to avoid miscalculation while also establishing credibility. For the people living in and around these flashpoints, the stakes are immediate. In the West Philippine Sea, the Philippine name for parts of the South China Sea, fisheries, energetic. Why prospects and livelihoods are intertwined with national pride and legal claims. Coast Guard standoffs and the occasional ramming or water cannon episode can escalate quickly when national media focus on bruising images. 4. Manila visible external support maps onto deterrence. If harassment of Philippine assets provokes a wider response, Beijing may think twice before further aggressive maneuvers, yet deterrence rests on psychology as much as on platforms. The question everyone is asking, the quiet question at seaworld watch stations and in the foreign ministries, is who will blink first? It's a question of thresholds. What harassment is tolerated? What level of damage or loss triggers an alliance response? The Mutual Defense Treaty between the Philippines and the United States, now in its 75th year, remains the legal backstop. It obliges both parties to consult and act if an armed attack occurs in the Pacific area against either party. But the treaty is not an automa. Tick missile, it requires political will, constitutional processes and calculations that go beyond the legal text. That ambiguity is both a feature and a bug. It gives room for restraint, but also for strategic misreading. Across the basin, other capitals are watching closely. Tokyo's decision to let the self-defense forces take a combat role in Balikatan is historic. It reflects Tokyo's own strategic reorientation in response to Beijing's growing maritime assertiveness. Canberra, Ottawa, Paris and Wellington are signaling that regional security is not the concern of the United States and the Philippines alone. These partners bring not just uniforms, but alliance heft that expands the diplomatic and operational consequences of any escalations. China's public framing that outside powers are stoking confrontation and bringing external forces into the region resonates to an audience in many capitals that feared great power rivalry. Beijing is adept at casting local incidents as the productor. CTT of outside interference, yet this framing sits uneasily with the reality that many of the participating countries in Balikatan are literal states or regional partners with direct interest in sea lanes, fisheries and norms of navigation. What keeps the situation from spinning out is the professional restraint visible in most official statements. Organizers emphasize that Balikatan is defensive in nature, that exercises are not directed at a specific power, and that the training includes humanitarian assistance and disaster relief scenarios, as well as combat rehearsals. Beijing emphasizes risk and the need for tranquility. Both sides claim prudence, even as their movements harden the operational picture. There is another, less visible domain where the contest is accelerating: cyber and space. Balikatan includes drills to test resilience to digital disruption and to protect space-based assets that underpin maritime surveillance and targeting. China's anti-access area denial strategy. The conflict towards intentionally seek to complicate the use of satellites, long-range sensors, and secure networks. If a crisis were to unfold, the contest would not be decided by guns and missiles alone. It would be fought through data, connectivity, and the ability to see and communicate. So, what happens next? For the moment, the Allied forces continue to train. Ships pass each other at safe distances. Aircraft execute coordinated intercepts following agreed codes of conduct. Diplomacy cycles through public rebukes and quieter channels. Manila insists it will defend its sovereign rights. Beijing insists it will protect what it calls its maritime claims. Washington insists on treaty obligations and regional stability while managing global commitments. The most plausible near-term outcome is more of the same: robust signaling accompanied by careful de-escalation on the tactical level. But that is not the same as safety. Live fire exercises, missile tests, carrier strikes, and closer naval maneuvers increase the chance of a misstep, a miscalculation. A ship too close, a missile misfired. An unverified launch could create a crisis that none of the participants wanted. The public conversation on both sides of these waters is changing too. In Manila, there is an argument for normalization, that the Philippines should build capacity and diversify ties to avoid being forced into a single, brittle posture. In Beijing, the narrative is that perimeter defense and red lines must be defended against foreign interference. In Washington and allied capitals, the calculation is whether deterrence through presence and partnership will stabilize the region or simply harden rivalries. At the end of the day, Balikatan is a rehearsal of choices. It is a test of whether multilateral deterrence can coexist with a channel for restraint. It is a demonstration that alliance politics and the distribution of military capabilities still matter in shaping behavior at sea, and it is a reminder that in the modern maritime environment, peacetime posture and wartime readiness are inseparable. If you listen closely to the rhetoric and to the maneuvers, you see both the threat and the insurance policy, maritime forces, flex diplomats talk, and public's watch. The real question is not whether the drills are necessary. Most countries involved argue they are, but whether their utility in deterring coercion outweighs the risk of escalation that their very existence invites. Gorja Kun has warned that joining hands will ultimately backfire upon themselves. Gilberto Teodoro has answered with public mockery and legal challenges, insisting Manila will not be cowed. For now, the ships continue to train, the aircraft continue to fly, and the watch teams on both sides of the dispute count the hours and the sea miles. Whoever blinks first, at the political level, the military level, or the diplomatic level, will reshape the strategic baseline for the next year. Until then, the alliance rehearse. The rivals signal, the fishing boats and coastal communities watch. And for now, the Indo Pacific keeps its breath.